Parents, teachers, guardians, and mentors. We can all agree you've got big shoes to fill, and it may feel like they're always getting bigger and more daunting. Welcome to Parenting Adventures, where we aim to be a beacon of support and knowledge for those navigating the complexities of parenting. Each episode, we bring on experts to walk us through the most pressing issues facing families, with evidence-based, practical strategies. And if school struggles are part of the puzzle, check out how Tutor Teach can help. Now, let's dive into the episode.
Have you ever wondered how to raise kids who are not just financially responsible, but money smart for life? I'm your host, Lara, and today we're excited to have Robin Taub with us. Robin is a chartered professional accountant, keynote speaker, and award-winning author. Her latest book, The Wisest Investment, gives parents the information, strategies, and inspiration they need to teach their kids about money. Robin's extensive career spans roles in audit, taxation, and she even served as chair of CPA Canada's Women's Leadership Council. In this episode, Robin shares her insights on teaching kids about money through the 5 pillars of money: earn, save, spend, share, and invest. We'll explore how parents can make use of teachable moments in everyday life, avoid common financial pitfalls, and adapt money lessons as kids grow older. Robin also highlights the importance of modeling good financial habits and starting these lessons early to set kids up for a lifetime of financial literacy. If you've ever felt unsure about how to navigate this topic with your kids, this episode is packed with practical tips, age-appropriate strategies, and expert advice you won't want to miss. Stay tuned. Robin, thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to dive into this topic with you. Let's start with your book, The Wisest Investment. What inspired you to write it, and why is teaching kids about money something you're so passionate about?
Well, the reason I wrote the book was I am an accountant by training, and I've always felt comfortable and confident around money and financial concepts. And I felt strongly that money management is a basic life skill, and it was something that I wanted to pass on to my own 2 kids. So when they were young, I started to invest in their education, and I started teaching them about money. And originally, it was this Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada published the book. So they actually commissioned me to write it. And I just felt like this was something that other parents struggle with, and they had done research that supported that. And I just felt like I wanted to help other parents with this because I was with that financial background and experience. I had worked in the industry for a while as, as an accountant and in tax and in finance. So for me, this came naturally, but it really doesn't for a lot of parents. So that's really what prompted them to ask me to write it. And then I updated the book about 3 years ago for the digital post-pandemic world because things had changed a bit and parents needed guidance in a slightly different way.
I love that. And it's true. It's something that you want to start implementing at a young age, but it's hard to know where to start. And we always rely on our friends and our community, people around us to get advice, but everyone's going to give you different advice. And so it can get a little bit twisted. And so having a one-stop place to really get professional guidance as a parent is just absolutely incredible. And so neat that you were specifically vetted to do this.
Yeah, I was actually on another committee for CPA Canada that was dealing with women's leadership in the profession. Totally unrelated, but something I was also passionate about. But I had been doing some work for the Ontario Securities Commission. I'm based here in Toronto. And based on the work I had done with that, and I also forgot to mention I have 2 kids. How could I forget that? And they're now in their 20s. So because I had kids and I had gone through this journey with them, then they felt like it would be a good fit for me to write this book. So as a parent, as an accountant, the 2 together.
Absolutely. I think it would have been important that you have your own kids so that you could really put that into practice. So why do you think financial literacy is such a crucial life skill for kids, especially to learn?
Well, let's look at it from 2 different perspectives. First, from the kid's perspective. I really do believe that it's a basic life skill that you really are it would be ideal to learn when you're younger, and then you can build on the skills that you develop as you progress through the different stages of childhood. Because as you go through life, you have to make responsible financial decisions. And the definition of financial literacy is having the knowledge, skills, and confidence to make responsible financial decisions at every life stage. So it's you cannot really get through this life without knowing something about money. So that's number one. Number two, starting early is important because the stakes just get higher as you get older. Second of all, habits. You want to start developing good financial habits at an early age because habits are like neural pathways. They take hold, they create grooves in the mind that rarely disappear. So it's hard to, if you have bad habits, it's hard to rewire those. So it's better to establish good habits early because they're sticky. So that's the second reason. And then the third reason is to try and avoid some of the consequences of being bad with money, like stress and anxiety. And, it's money's the number one source of stress, like levels double those for work, personal relationships, and health. And it can lead to losing sleep, but also physical health issues like migraines or high blood pressure, and mental health struggles like depression and anxiety. So it's the kind of thing that if parents have struggled with that, they really want their kids to avoid it. So those are like some of the, things we want our kids to avoid if they don't learn money skills. And also as parents, most Canadians can't afford to support their adult kids financially. So it's really important to teach them when they're young, let them, learn and practice and build on those skills so that when they are finished school and they start working, they can become financially independent, responsible and money smart for life, as the book subtitle says. So it's really for the benefit of the parents too.
And I imagine there's a generational component to that, where if the money sense doesn't start young and then you grow into an adult without money sense and then you start having children, then the next generation would then suffer from poor choices or poor understanding of money sense, and that just continues to go unless there's someone that breaks the trend.
It can be, because as parents, we really are important financial role models for our kids. They are, watching and learning, and they pick up a lot of things by osmosis and by the way we behave around money, even if it's not directly communicated. So yes, if parents are struggling and they're not great with money, there is a concern that their kids may be as well. But I also want to say that it's never too late to learn how to do things better. So if parents are feeling like, I'm not really setting a great example, it's okay. You can start now. It's something you and your kids can learn together. But also kids are going to learn it elsewhere too. So they're going to learn it in school. So they're going to have that opportunity. Lots of, all the provinces are now doing things to encourage financial literacy learning in school. Some of it's mandatory for graduation. So that's one good thing. I mean, they may be learning from their grandparents or from their older siblings or family friends. And even, like in some cases, if the parents do have means and they have financial advisors, perhaps, they're learning from the financial advisors as well as from the media, including social media. So there's so many ways. Like, I don't want kids to feel discouraged if their parents are struggling or aren't great, that's their fate, because I don't think it has to be, but I think it is something parents need to be aware of, is what they're teaching by example.
So when do you think parents should begin these money lessons with their kids? Is there a specific age, or do you recommend starting as early as possible?
Well, the Wisest Investment starts the chapter. The first chapter is really for parents to help them get their own financial house in order so they can lead by example, which is what we just discussed. But then the first chapter focuses on young kids. And I've said that starts at around age 5, so 5 to 8. Now, you might have a child that's very curious about money, that's always asking you for things or asking about it and sees what their friends have at school. So you got to take your cues from your kid, and you'll know if it's the time. But I think if they haven't by 5, it's appropriate to start having those conversations. And with young kids, you still want to start with cash, and it's just so tangible and easy. You have young kids, you get that. It's easy for them to understand. You don't want to jump right into digital money with like a 5-year-old. But then as they progress through the different stages, so I've identified them as like young kids, 5 to 8, preteens, 9 to 12, teenagers, 13 to 17, and then emerging adults, 18 and over. You're still building on the same, what I call 5 pillars of money. And I'll tell you about those in a sec, but the specific topics and examples will become more sophisticated as they get older.
My 8-year-old, he's just about 9. He has had a rude awakening about life lately. And he kind of started crying at the supper table recently. And he says, we don't get any free time in school anymore, and it's all learning and no more playing and whatnot. And so I find that age to be really pivotal. And same with his swimming lessons. Like, he's doing laps now instead of, singing songs and playing. And so I find that to be a really, really pivotal age for kids where they do start getting that sense for things that, it's not all fun and games anymore. It's a little bit more rigid. It's a little bit less flexible. It's a little bit more intentional and goal oriented. And so, of course, he has an interest in learning how to earn and how to spend and divide his money up. But I do find that age, so far, he's our oldest, but I've seen a bit of a change there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like 5 and 6-year-olds are still little kids. 7 is, they say, the age of reason. So that's when they start developing, more, just more skills like reading and writing and all that stuff. So yeah, I agree with you. 8, and then at 9 already, they're starting to be, they're preteens. They're a little more independent. They're with their friends more. I agree with you. And I think, again, at the teenage years, like the high school, when you switch to high school, that's also when it's like a very critical stage to have some of this money management skills under your belt. And you mentioned that your son, wants to learn about earning and spending. So I mentioned the 5 pillars. So I encourage parents to teach their kids at whatever age and stage they're at about these 5 pillars. And they are earn, save, spend, share, and invest. So those 5 pillars cover pretty much any money topic you could come across or think of.
Awesome. So, yeah, can you break down those 5 pillars a little bit more in detail?
Well, I mean, there's, again, like, so within each chapter of the book, depending on the stage your child's at, there's going to be really specific topics and examples under each of these 5. So earn, how do you make money? When you're little, you're getting gifts from the tooth fairy or for your birthday or allowance. I mean, that gifts for birthdays will follow throughout childhood, but specifically young kids, they don't have jobs. Preteens, they might work like part-time jobs, or sorry, not even part-time, like odd jobs, like babysitting or things like that. And then, of course, teenagers can get real jobs. And then when you're in post-secondary or even in the real world, you're really working. So earning is always the first step, because you have to have money coming in before you can choose what to do with it. So another source of money for a lot of kids at home is allowance. So again, that's like a whole other topic, but essentially once you earn money, you can choose to either save it, spend it, share it, or invest it. And with depending on the stage your child is at, there's going to be age appropriate topics to cover under each of those pillars. And, like, you're not going to start talking to your 6-year-old about credit cards, but you might start discussing that with your tween, your preteen, and then your teenager. If you decide to give them a supplementary card, you're going to want to talk a lot more about it. And then they're prepared when they are old enough, they've reached the age of majority, and they can get their own card. So it's sort of like a progression over time.
And I think that introducing it younger avoids risk later. So, like you said, the credit card thing, the misuse of credit cards is wildly known. And it's, it could be that if they don't know what it is, then they just think it's, infinite money spending and they go ahead.
Yes.
But if you teach them at a young age that it's still the equivalency of, cash, and that you have to really be careful with how you spend it, then, because you still have to pay for it, then they'll go into it smarter and take less risks.
Exactly. And that's a great example, credit cards, because a lot of even teenagers are naive. They don't know how they work if they've never had one, or they've seen you use one, but they don't really get that it is, you are borrowing money for a short period of time, but you do have to pay that balance off within those few weeks. Otherwise, interest will kick in. So and I get into a lot of detail in the book about this because it is so important, because as you know, credit card interest rates are like above 20% now. So it's very easy to get into trouble pretty fast if you buy things that you can't afford to pay off within, that period of the credit card statement. So yeah, that's why I said earlier, like, the stakes are low when your kids are young. It's a great time to start teaching them about the 5 pillars. And as they get older, the stakes get higher. And if they don't have the knowledge, skills, and confidence, then they may run into some trouble. And credit cards is such a common one, especially if kids are going to university and they get bombarded with these offers, but it's not free money. It's real. You're really spending. And some kids, they just don't know, and it's not their fault. But if we can prepare them to be responsible with credit, it is an important tool. It helps you build a credit history. It's very convenient and safe. So there's lots of good things about them, but lots of pitfalls.
I know one of my kids asked me recently, like, I see, because we always spend with cards, right? And whether it's a debit card and they're like, well, how does the money get there? Like, they don't know how to formulate the connection there. They just think that we go to a grocery store, we tap it, the card, and then that's it. It's paid for and it looks easy peasy. But we try and explain to them, like, that was money earned, and then we took the money that we earned and we put it on the card to afford ourselves these groceries. And so it's like, really, you have to draw it out for them.
That's so great that you raised that, Lara, because that's a great example of a teachable moment, which is what I tell parents to look for. Because many parents feel like they don't have the time, let alone the knowledge to teach their kids. So looking for these opportunities to build a little money lesson into your daily life, and that is such a classic one or when you go to the ATM, if you take out cash, they're just like, how does this like money just come out of a hole in the wall? But to explain to them that you work, like they must see that you work if you work from home partially or what have you. They explain to them what you do, depending on their age, what education you needed to do that job. And then that money has to satisfy all the needs of the household and then the wants. And that, yeah, like maybe with an older child, they might understand. You could show them like your banking portal, and you could show them, yeah, here's where the money comes in that I make, and this is the credit card, and it's like, yeah, like it's just so conceptual. Like a 6 or 7 year old is not going to understand how that tapping allows you to actually take things off a shelf. But as they get older, you can start to explain it a little bit more.
I think the thing that I love the most about this is that parents are having these conversations, because conversations 20 years ago might not have happened like this, or they might have been a little bit more reserved. Like, I knew that, we don't ask our parents about their money, and, that was kind of taboo. And now this is encouraging parents to have a conversation with their kids to talk about money, and it's a safe space. And if you're struggling, come to me. And if you're doing really well, come to me, and keep it an open dialogue.
It is something that people are uncomfortable talking about. Parents are afraid they may get awkward questions from their kids, like, are we rich or are we poor? Or like, do you have a mortgage, or how much money do you make? And like parents are so uncomfortable answering these questions, but you don't always, and again, depending on your child's age, you want to make sure the information that you share is age appropriate and takes into account their temperament as well. If your kid's a worrier, you want to share in a different way. But it's just such a great opening and another teachable moment to talk about money and to give them, impart some of these lessons. And you don't have to like pull out your pay stub or your tax return. You don't have to get into like those numbers if you don't think it's appropriate with your child at that stage. But the fact that they're asking means they're curious and they deserve a good answer.
So you touched on the idea of these teachable moments in everyday life. Can you just expand on this and share an example of what these might look like for parents and how they can utilize them?
Sure. I mean, the typical one is that I pull out all the time is going to the grocery store. So if you're taking your young kids with you, it's like such a classic. I'm sure you see every time you go to the grocery, you see little kids with their parents doing the shopping. It's an opportunity to talk about comparison shopping, cost versus value. Two items that may be similar, like cookies, but they're priced very differently because one's a brand name and one is a no name. And, just getting into some of that stuff. You can even look at the unit price of items, like what it costs per unit to compare as well. If your kid's into math or you think that they would appreciate that. And then when you pay the bill, like if you're pulling out your phone or your debit card or your credit card, like explaining what you're doing. If you're using cash with your young child, sometimes here and there, they could be the ones to pay and, get the change and kind of count it out and get the receipt. There's so many great lessons, like as you go about your daily lives. I mean, another funny story I heard was one family that was doing a renovation, and they used it as a lesson in budgeting. And this is with a teenager, but you have a budget with line items, and they went through it and they explained exactly, what they were doing and what things cost. And there's just so many, like having garage sale is a great example too. If you have young kids helping you with that, like it's just running a little business where you're selling things. So many.
Mm. I remember selling rocks that I painted at the end of my driveway.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's where it starts, dog walking, all that.
Yeah, it's true. Like kids, I mean, I've had one of my neighbors was selling like beaded bracelets that she was donating part of the proceeds to charity. So again, like you're hitting two pillars there, because you've got like the invest sort of business side plus the share side. There's just so many, just they will really crop up naturally. You just have to get creative and look for them, and just take the time to explain something to your child, because it may feel like more work at the time to explain, but it's really worth it, because you're teaching them something that they're going to build on for the rest of their lives.
We were noticing that my oldest son wasn't quite grasping the value of a dollar. So we went to Walmart and we said, you can have $10 and you pick out something. And so he goes down the aisles. He's like, well, I want this. And, oh, well, that's $29.99. Okay, well, I want this. Well, that's, $24.99. And he kind of got irritated by the whole thing. And he was like, everything is too expensive. And I was like, look at $10 doesn't always go a long way, but you can get creative. So, you know how to read numbers. Now start reading the numbers and see what's available. And so he ended up settling on a Star Wars kind of lightsaber thing. And he was really thrilled with it. But in the car, he said, I didn't think that it would be so hard to find something under $10. And
That's a great lesson for him. And the other thing too is teaching them a bit about sales tax, because, or maybe you don't have that in Alberta. Do you? Oh, you have GST. Yeah. So it's only 5%. Where in Ontario, it's 13. But just like think, he might find something and it's 9.99 and he thinks he's got enough, and then he's going to get to the cash, and he's going to, oh, you have to budget for the sales tax too. You have to pay it. And like, what is it? What's it for? What does it go towards? So getting into that with maybe, a slightly older child. But I think that's such a great lesson, to give. And that's another reason why parents use allowance as a teaching tool, because if you give them some of their own money that they feel accountable for and responsible for, they're going to think longer and harder about how to spend it and how to use it. Like you could see he had to like run around and see like, what can I actually afford? Whereas if you were just like, okay, go pick something you like, and you just tapped your card, it wouldn't feel the same. Like he wouldn't be thinking about it in the same way if he wasn't paying.
And I love that you talk about sharing, and that can be done obviously during, the holiday season, where you do start having those dialogues with your children about maybe children who are less fortunate, and donating some of your toys, and being able to think about other people. And so I love that you tap into that too, that it's not just a self-centric practice of using money, but thinking of others and considering others around you.
And that's what you're trying to do, because I think a lot of parents are worried about their kids developing a sense of entitlement and becoming a bit spoiled. And by bringing the share pillar in, you are reminding them that they're fortunate and to be grateful. And you need to model gratitude as well as a parent. But yeah, doing things like that, like giving away some of your used things that are in good condition to somebody less fortunate, or maybe even like you can do a birthday party where you collect the guests to the party, kind of give money, and then you can choose a charity that you want to support with that, and then they just get like one gift instead of 25 different gifts. So there's so many ways to teach young kids that. And even just volunteering your time is another really important way to share, when young students or young people don't have a lot of extra money, but they do have time and they can give back that way.
So you mentioned earlier that parents are important role models for their children when it comes to financial responsibility. What are some of the common mistakes you see parents making with their kids when it comes to teaching financial responsibility, and how can they avoid these?
Yeah, well, not talking about it, like not starting. Parents are busy. you're doing lots of different things with your kids, academic stuff, extracurricular stuff. You got to get food, dinner made. It's a busy time with young growing families. So sometimes parents, just because it's hard to talk about, they just kind of avoid the topic because they're busy. So just not talking about it is one thing. Not starting early enough. Like, again, it's never too late, but it's ideal if you can start when your kids are younger so you get to build on those skills. Um, I think parents also, they're afraid to talk about it because, they're not perfect or they're not great with money or they've made mistakes, but that should not stop you. You can even share some of the mistakes you've made. So your kids know it's okay if they make mistakes too, as long as you learn from them. That's the important part. Failure and mistakes can be just as important as doing things right when it comes to learning about money. So you just want to do it when the stakes are low. So I think those are some of the main things I see, or, not giving an allowance at all or not giving it consistently. Again, that just deprives your child of the opportunity to make choices around saving, spending, sharing, and investing and living with those consequences. So I think, just the sooner you start, the better. But if you haven't yet, just jump in with whatever stage your child is at.
I love that. And just being vulnerable, like you said, is sharing some of your lessons learned and your opportunities as a younger person and how, maybe you were able to save for something like post-secondary education or for your first car or, a trip
Mhm.
that you went on when you were younger. How did you get there? What was the journey that you took to get where you got? Because there's no way that you never made a mistake down the line.
Yeah, you can share some of the goals that you had when you were their age, um, or just throughout your life, like how you have set goals and what you've had to do in order to achieve those goals. What kind of planning was involved, because you want to teach kids to delay gratification. And that's like a really important life skill. And by setting goals, that teaches them how to do that, how to save for the longer term or the medium term or the long term instead of spending everything today.
This conversation is so loaded and there's so many details that I would keep going into with you because I think that it's kind of new. It's kind of a new thought to especially for me because my kids are young and so I know that a lot of parents with younger kids can resonate that yeah, you kind of have to go out of your comfort zone a little bit and find ways
Yeah.
to draw that into your conversation.
Yeah, and again, going back to like when I was telling you why I wrote the book, like for me, it was always within my comfort zone. I'm very lucky for that because my training as an accountant and the job that I've always worked in money and finance, so it's just second nature for me. But for many parents, it's really overwhelming. They don't know where to start. They don't know what information to share with kids of different ages. So my goal really was to create a resource that was easy to read, accessible, that parents could, you don't have to sit and read the whole thing at once. You can just focus on whatever chapter that corresponds to your child's age and pick it up again when they get older. There's exercises and self-assessment tools to make it really practical. So I really wanted to make this something that would take away that intimidation and that feeling of overwhelm and feel like, okay, I've got a resource that I can use. That's not trying to sell me anything or push anything. It's just really to help me do this really important job of teaching my kids about money.
And it's relevant to the age and stage of your child because right now I'm not thinking about the 17-year-old child of mine. I'm
Right.
thinking, so I love that because, like you said, if parents are feeling too busy to talk to them about it, they might be feeling too busy to read about it. And if it's just small little chunks that you can go through, it's manageable.
That was the idea, exactly. Because, and I think I even write on it, like, if you're too busy parenting to teach your kids about money, this is a perfect book because it really does try to chunk it down. And just if you're trying to think, like, well, what should my kid know at this stage? Again, it's going to be something under one of those 5 pillars. I think I've covered most things. And it's just reassuring to parents that, like, okay, I know that they know what they should at this stage of life. And then if you have an older child, you can even give them the book. They can read it themselves and they'll be able to understand it as well, even though it is written for like a parent to deliver the information. An older child would be able to glean that information too.
And it's just another excuse to spend time with your kid and to kind of dive into something with them. So
I agree. And even like playing like a board game, like that's a financial one, like Monopoly or Life, like if you do that kind of thing as a family, you can, that's also like a great opportunity to just talk a little bit more about real life and what it costs.
Before we wrap up, where can listeners learn more about you and get their hands on a copy of The Wisest Investment?
Right. So I have one of my websites is thewisestinvestment.com. So that's a great place to go to order the book. And it's available online only. And right now, I think there's a postal strike in Canada, which is terrible timing. But essentially, Amazon and other online retailers. And then I have a second website, which is my name, robintaub.com, Robin with an I, Taub. And that just has more information too about my speaking, the media I've done, podcasts like this will be on there. Just also other resources that parents may be searching for, like online courses, other books, government websites, anything that supports financial literacy. So that's on the robintaub.com website.
That's awesome. And honestly, this is such an important topic, one that doesn't get touched on enough, if I were to be honest with you. And I think that at the end of the day, anyone listening to this is going to have a light bulb moment to go, am I doing enough in this space, or am I doing anything in this space? And if not, today's the day to start. So I think that you've done a really good job summarizing kind of the values behind money sense for children, when to start teaching them at the age of 5, and kind of the different progressive stages of learning about money, and how we can be a positive influence through our success stories, our failure stories, and our own journeys. So just love your work. I think it's amazing.
Thanks, Lara. And the learning never stops, like the book kind of stops at that emerging adult stage, but truly, like, I'm still learning about money. I make it a priority. I think my kids, even though they don't live at home anymore, they're in their 20s, they see that I'm very conscientious about my finances. And I'm still, always paying attention to things and what's going on with like taxes and investing and the markets and whatnot. And yeah, I think it's important to keep learning about this stuff throughout your life, but you need the foundation. That's my point.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for this episode of Parenting Adventures. Thanks for listening. We hope it gives you that extra bit of confidence that you need to conquer the road ahead. And if you're looking for academic support to ensure your kids thrive in school, visit tutorteach.ca to learn how we're here for families just like yours. We'll see you in the next episode.